So later this week, Solo, a Star Wars story, is going to hit theaters, and this is one of those movies that the internet's just been going bonkers about it ever since they first announced it. So today I'm going to give my 4 reasons that I think that this movie could suck. And before you get too excited or too angry with me, just so you know, tomorrow I'm going to counterbalance it, and I'm going to give my reasons that I think it could be awesome. Now, before I start giving my reasons as to why it might suck, go ahead and tell me down below in the comment section, why do you think that this movie could suck, have issues, have problems? Tell me down below in the comment section. Let's have a nice, lively, respectful conversation. With that said, let's get started. Reason number 1 that it could suck, the director swap. Now, when they first announced this movie, it was going to be directed by Lord and Miller. Now, these are the guys behind the Lego movie, 21 Jump Street, 22 Jump Street. These are guys that have a very fresh, modern, highly energetic style that's very kind of modern and contemporary. So this was a very interesting selection because of the nature of Star Wars being a little bit timeless in this type of storytelling, a little bit old-fashioned, as well as that they have Lawrence Kasdan writing the script for it. This is the guy that did Empire Strikes Back, worked on Return of the Jedi, and so it's a very unique mix of very fresh, modern, and very kind of classic old-fashioned, or not classic, but a little bit of an older era. So, as they started going into production, some things didn't go quite right, and Lord and Miller were a little bit too energetic, a little bit too into improvisation, and eventually it kind of fell through, and they were removed from the project, and they brought in Ron Howard to basically reshoot all of the movie to get back to that original script and replace most of what Lord and Miller were bringing to the table. And so anytime you have a director swap, it makes you nervous. Like, what's going on behind the scenes? Why did they hire the original people? Why did they go in a new direction? This is trouble. It's never a good sign. The reason that this is kind of so like, whoa, what's going on here to me is that Lord and Miller are so contemporary, year 2018, who's the most interesting directors working that you're excited to see what they're going to do next. And they replaced them with Ron Howard, kind of one of these aging legacy directors that has an amazing resume, that's been around a long time, worked with Lucasfilm on Willow back in the 80s. This isn't like some fresh other new person. He's like the safest pick you can have. And so they kind of fully went in the opposite direction, which makes me nervous about the people that selected Lord and Miller in the first place, because those are the same people that went, oh, let's go in the opposite direction, Ron Howard. And that there seems like a lack of cohesive vision in what they were originally trying to do. And it's not just, it's like the director swap makes me nervous in and of itself, but that decision making above it that would hire Lord and Miller, that you would know would bring that frantic Lego movie, the irreverence of 21 Jump Street. You know that's what they would bring to this. So why would you hire them in the first place, and then to go in such an opposite direction with the safest director, maybe second safest behind Steven Spielberg that you could get? That's where, for me, I'm very nervous about that level of decision making. So potentially this movie could suck because of that. Second reason that this movie could suck is the prequel problem. So anytime you do a prequel, one of the things that's inherent to the nature of that is you're telling the story beforehand. You're telling, we know this information, we know where people end up, we know who survives, we know who die, or we don't necessarily, sometimes we know who dies. And so you're telling the story of how we got to where they are. And there's always an inherent problem in prequels is that a certain amount of dramatic tension is removed because we know who lives, who dies, what types of relationships are going to happen, how this is going to play out. We know the character of Lando. We know somewhat the character of Han and the relationship with Chewie going into it, so it immediately puts a level of predictability into it, as well as the new characters that they bring into it. If they establish a love story, you know that this love story can only go so far. If they establish someone as a mentor that we'll never hear anything about ever again, you know that this might not go where you think it's going to go, or the way the movie's presenting it to be going early on in the movie. This is the prequel problem, and it's potentially what will kind of go on in this movie is this, we already know where things are headed. You can't have too many gigantic twists and turns in it and be like, surprise, he was a Force user. I mean, you can't do that. You can't have all these big twists and turns, and it just kind of inherently The inherent problem of prequels is there's a predictability and a lack of dramatic tension in certain types of ways with the storytelling, and that makes me a little bit nervous that will this kind of chop any sort of or soften all of the edges out of this movie, and it's just kind of we're going on an adventure with it. Reason number 3 it could suck is that the movie might be answering questions I was never asking with answers I really don't want to hear. This is a second prequel problem that happened, and this one is a fear that some of us that kind of watched the prequel trilogy when we were a little bit older, this is one of the big issues inside of the prequels, is that they answered questions we weren't answering with horrible answers. So I had never watched the original trilogy and thought, I wonder who made C-3PO. I wonder who that was. And then the prequels answer that question. Oh, Anakin did. Darth Vader himself built C-3PO. That wasn't a question I was asking, and that's definitely not an answer to that question I wanted to hear. It just ties things together in ways that, like, I don't think that makes things better. Likewise, the Jango Fett Boba Fett connection to the clones, which is the connection to the stormtroopers, that's a question I wasn't really asking, and an answer I really didn't want to hear that ties things together in ways that I don't think makes the universe better. It's just, it feels this necessary, like, let's tie it all together in ways that I don't think I really like. Now, when it comes to Solo and Han Solo's story and the Millennium Falcon and certain games with Lando, it's a different type of issue. It's not, my fears aren't the same as what they were with the prequels where they're answering these really superfluous questions. It comes to a different dynamic that you have with Han Solo, which is he's this rogue scoundrel that kind of talks himself up, that maybe he's not actually as good as he says he is, but he's a guy that gets it done. And so throughout the movies, he keeps being successful because he's good. But part of the charm is that you don't even know when he's lying and how much is what. And is he the fastest? Is this the best ship? Or is he just this egomaniac? And you don't necessarily want to have answers to all these questions, and knowing a little bit too much can take away some of the allure to Han Solo. Like, I don't need to see exactly how it plays out. I don't need to see him in, like, you know, going to Imperial School or whatever he does in this movie to love Han Solo. And so I'm a little bit nervous that they're going to feel the need to answer questions I am definitely not asking, and they're going to give me some of those prequel type answers where you're like, oh, really? I don't like this. Likewise, you know, what's these formative events that we need to see to understand his character in the previous movies? Like, he was this rogue scoundrel type person. I don't need to have them give me these new, like, reveals as to why he is the way that he is. I don't think that helps me like the character more, which that's kind of a fear going into this movie. And finally, the fourth reason that this movie could suck is that this is safe filmmaking. Here's what I mean by that. When they first announced that Disney bought Lucasfilm, they're going to do new Star Wars movies, and they're going to do both a new trilogy of episodes as well as standalone stories, solo stories, everyone on the internet was like, oh, I wonder if they're going to do a Han Solo movie, a Boba Fett movie, a Obi-Wan Kenobi movie. I started to say Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then I started saying movie in the middle of Kenobi, so it turned into a funny word. You know, a Yoda movie. And they were the most kind of obvious base level. Anyone that has a superficial knowledge of Star Wars that's watched them one time, they could be like, what if you took that character and gave them their own movie? That was everyone's basic interpretation of what you could do. And that's what they went with. They went with a movie about the Death Star, which is a little bit clever in that type of storytelling, but just saying who's a popular character that you could tell a solo story about. Not really Luke Skywalker, Han Solo. It's like the most obvious prequel they could do. Just such an obvious direction to go that everyone was speculating. Everyone was thinking, oh, will they do this? Well, I guess that's what they're doing. And that makes me kind of nervous. Likewise, it also feels a little bit like a decision made by the marketing department. Because if you say we're going to do a Knights of the Old Republic movie, you say, how do you market that? Well, it's Star Wars. Well, okay, so is Luke Skywalker in it? No, it's set 1,000 years before all that. Well, what's it about? It's in the Star Wars universe. It's difficult to market to people outside of people that are really into the EU, the extended universe, that read the books and played the video games. It's a lot more difficult to market. Likewise, if you say, we're going to tell this story about a character you've never heard of before on the far end of the galaxy, then on a planet you've never heard of before. So how do you market that? You say it's in the universe of Star Wars, but with no characters, no planets or anything like that. That's a little confusing. But you can very easily say, this is a Han Solo movie. It's set before A New Hope, and you see kind of where he meets Lando and Chewie and gets the Millennium Falcon. Very easy to propose what this movie is. The marketing department loves that sort of thing. The businessmen love that sort of thing where you can very easily, here's how we will sell it to people. This is what the marketing campaign will look like. Boom, let's make it happen. That's where I was never wanting to see a Han Solo movie for the reasons I mentioned before of the prequel problem and then the answering questions that I don't want answered question. That made me very nervous. As soon as they said they were making this movie, I was not crazy about them making it. And then likewise, I just kind of went, I could come up with this idea. Like I could write this script for this movie. I can't write as good as Lawrence Kasdan can write, but I can come up with the idea of what this movie would be like because it's such an obvious direction. It's so easy to direct it. Likewise, it's one that's so easy to come up with a marketing campaign. You don't immediately have this sense of like, oh, that's a clever idea. Wow, where'd you come up with that one? It just seems the story that we all kind of know what it's going to be, how it's kind of going to play out, just giving it to us. So safe. And that makes me really nervous because Star Wars in and of itself was such a risk when it came out. And then what they did with Empire Strikes Back and telling this story that like the good guys don't win in the end, it's a bit of a cliffhanger, that's risky filmmaking. And then we get to today and it's so obvious what they're doing and what they're trying to do. And that makes me really nervous about this movie and where it potentially could be going. Anyway, like I said, those are my 4 reasons that I'm very nervous about this movie, that it could potentially suck. Tell me your reasons down below. Let me know why you think that this one might not live up to the Star Wars name and the brand. But also with all that said, tomorrow I'm going to come back and give you the reasons that I think this actually could be a pretty fun movie. I think there's potential for this to be a very rewatchable, fun adventure for us to go on. You'll find out about that tomorrow. And if you're new to my channel, please consider clicking that subscribe button. I do movie reviews, TV reviews, ranking videos. But the key thing is I don't want to just talk about movies that are about to come out, why they might be awesome, why they might suck. I want to talk about that with you. I want to hear your ideas. I want to go back and forth with you. Which one of my ideas are good? Which one of them are bad? Tell me down below in the comment section. And as always, thank you for watching.